What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Altitude Show. I'm your host, Dave Brinker. The Altitude Show is brought to you by Mountain Tough Fitness. It changed my life. This hunting season was the easiest physically I've ever had, and that was because I trained for the last year with Mountain Tough Fitness. You can get Mountain Tough off the App Store or just simply by going to mountaintough.com. That's mtntough.com. Download the app. Use my code DAVE20 to get 20% off your subscription. What it is, it's a whole fitness program with the idea of you getting ready for the mountains. And there's lots of different ways to get there depending on your level of athleticism and where you are in your workout routine. They have programs for everybody. The one that I use the most, that I find the most helpful, is the Minimal Gear Dailies. They post them every day. They delete them every night. So it's always changing, always evolving. And you don't need a lot of gear. You can do it right at your home. Just a couple dumbbells, maybe a step up, and a pull-up bar is about all you need ever. And some days you don't need anything, and it will kick your butt. The coolest thing about it is it's only 35, 40 minutes, and it's awesome. So I highly recommend it if you're getting ready for hunting season or whatever your outdoor endeavors are, or you just simply want to get in shape. Get the Mountain Tough app, MTN Tough app off the App Store. Use my code DAVE20 to get 20% off. All right, today we have Cory Ford on the podcast. I wanted to do a recap of his season. He's from Angry Spike, and he's a fellow Pacific Northwester and spends a ton of time hunting Roosevelts. So I wanted to touch base with him. We were supposed to meet up in the woods this fall, and we didn't. So he had an awesome season in Oregon and in Idaho. Hope you guys enjoy the episode, and go check out Angry Spike Productions on YouTube. They put out some awesome content, and give Cory Ford a follow on Instagram. All right, guys, enjoy the episode. My wife's like very lenient, and I'm very lucky, but she's a little over hunting season at this point. So,
January is a whole new year.
Yeah.
It resets.
Yeah. I'm going wild pig hunting in California in February, and then January I have 2 shows that I have to go to. Or one in January, the sheep show, and then the expo in February. Yeah, so yeah, and with holidays and everything, I'm like, I should probably not.
Yeah. I was giving Brian and Ryan a hard time the other day because I was like, you guys could just stop in Arizona on your way to Mexico. I was like, come on, Ryan, you can go down there and try to kill a big mule deer in Arizona, and then turn right around and kill a big coos deer in Mexico. I was like, I would think that would sell you.
No,
he's like, he's got a bunch of other stuff that he's got going on in January too, so he only really has time for the Mexico hunt.
The coos, dude.
Yeah,
I want to. I miss that. I miss that a lot. I went like 4 years in a row. It's so fun. It's just the weather. The weather's so nice, and the quantity of deer you see is awesome. It's never boring. Like, they move all day. But yeah, I got to watch my time, and running multiple businesses and trying to be a dad, and those things,
all that stuff. Yeah,
but right now I'm razor focused on. I grew up in Oregon, live here now. I've never focused on blacktails. I've shot quite a few blacktails, but I've never killed what I would classify as a really big blacktail. So
yeah, those are 2 coos right there.
Woo!
These ones right. Those are Arizona.
Wow, archery?
Yeah. Well, one of them's rifle, one of them's archery, and then these are all blacktail up here. Oh, there's one axis deer in the middle, but
I got a coos right here above my desk.
Those are all blacktail, except for the little dinky axis deer in the center.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Blacktail, dude. The more I learn about blacktail, I think everybody's missing the ball on the hardest game to hunt. I mean, coos is hard, but there's a lot of them, so you're always in the action. Right. Colombian blacktail, coastal blacktail. I'm not talking about California. It's totally different. I've hunted down there.
Right.
like Pacific Northwest coastal blacktail, not Sitka blacktail either, are, in my opinion, the hardest game animal in the West to kill a mature one with a bow.
Absolutely.
In my opinion.
Or even sometimes, I mean, even with a rifle, you'd make the argument that killing a mature one with a rifle.
Dude, it might be harder to do it with a rifle than a bow, actually,
Yep.
because the season ends earlier. And now that I've been running cameras pretty solid, and I have a better education, like a lot of data to go from, it's astounding how much time I wasted in the field with the wrong conditions. These deer, just the big ones, do not move in the daylight unless they're under very specific and special circumstances. They just don't.
Right.
They will not. It's got to be in the right conditions during the rut or during velvet. But like anytime in between that, good luck with it. I mean, the young bucks move, the does move here and there, but even that, for the most part, we didn't start getting daylight pictures of anything, a random doe here and there, until right before Thanksgiving. I mean, excuse me, Halloween.
Yeah.
Yep. And then there was a little flurry of daylight buck action right before Halloween and on Halloween. And then it went completely dead until yesterday. But the buck that I actually posted him on my Instagram, he's a big old 2-point. We have in 2 months 2 confirmed daylight pictures of him. So like if you like run the odds of you being in the right tree at the right time on that buck, it's pretty low, man. Because both daylight pictures of him were not in the same spot. So you never know where he's going to pop up. They just don't move. They're just ninjas, man. And the ones that do move get shot in rifle season.
Think about how many of them you see when you're out elk hunting. Like that many of them. Never.
Yeah.
You know, very rare when you see a good mature blacktail when you're out chasing Roosevelts. And you're looking in a lot of the same country. You know, except at night when you're driving, you'll run into them in the roads all the time. You know, I was out last weekend and saw some does. It was down on the coast, a lot of the area that we elk hunt in, and found some does with no bucks. Driving out, saw a spike, a fork and horn, and a 3-point in the dark on the road. What do you do with that? You know,
what's interesting to me is
so you're not going.
Yeah. What's interesting to me is, like in some of these areas, like this specific place where I'm archery hunting, they don't get hunted a lot. The neighbors might hunt them. It's just it's a farm, you know, and it's very similar to like a whitetail property, you know. So you don't have a totally controlled environment. So they may be getting pounded by the neighbors. I don't know, but there's really no reason for them to be super duper nocturnal. But they still are. I mean, they are just, and you know what's harder, dude? Because I'm still learning, getting in and out of there. Like even if they are moving, like getting to and from my tree stand is a pain in the ass, because I'm always just like, just don't bump them. Because you bump one of these big mature bucks, they just leave there and they don't show back up. And the last 2 times I've gone in this week, I bumped. The first time I bumped deer on the way out, which pissed me off because they saw me too, which is even worse. And then the last time a couple days ago, on the way out, in the right before dark, I bumped 2 of the bucks 200 yards below my stand, and I'm like, oh god, like it's not hard enough. Like getting in and out of your place is hard, you know?
Yeah, I've killed, I mean, between the 3 Sitka blacktail that I've killed, 31 blacktail in my life. Granted, I started hunting them when I was 12, so it's been a long time. But that being said, almost every single one of them is stock and spot, right? I mean, I just did a lot of pushes through timber, hunting the edges of the fringes of clear cuts, sitting on clear cuts, and almost every one of them was with the rifle. You know, so I haven't had the opportunity to. I mean, pretty much once I got away from blacktail, haven't done the tree stand thing, which I think would be a great time. And I'm looking at picking up that late tag for Oregon and hunting down there. You know, through December 17th, I think it goes. So take an opportunity to go down there and possibly do that. Tree stand probably not, but again, spot and stock with a bow if I can. So
Yeah, I'm with you. The tree stand thing, I mean, I've done some whitetail hunting in various states around the Midwest, and trying to think of the most of the deer I've killed. I've never killed I killed a blacktail out of a tree stand last year. That's the only one I've killed out of a tree stand. The rest have been on the ground, whatever. But have you out of the 31 that you've killed, how many of those would you consider like big?
Probably 3.
Yeah. So even then it's rare. Like you're super, super experienced blacktail guy.
So that's one. This buck right here.
Yeah.
He'll probably score 120.
Finding a 4-point is
super knurled bases. Really, it was a good old mature deer. And then the other one is this one right here. Now, the funny thing about that is it looks a lot like a whitetail because it's got a main beam that comes off, points coming out of that, double eye guards. Those 2 bucks were killed within a mile of each other.
Wow. Yeah, those are great bucks.
Those are 2 of the more mature bucks that I've killed in terms of my blacktail days. And they're good. I mean, they're not giants, but when you're talking, because there's a big difference between Southern Oregon coastal blacktails and Washington coastal stuff, or even Cascade blacktails. Neither one of those is a bench leg buck, and obviously, if you get into the bench leg stuff, you can get some giants. But yeah, I mean, those are just 2 true blacktails that were killed, Mount Adams area here in Washington. So
yeah, the bench leg thing is definitely intriguing. To be in an area where you could see like they kill 170-inch deer up there.
Oh yeah,
bigger.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of like the true coastal bucks. There's just something intriguing about them, and trying to find one, even like the ones you just showed. Those are tough to find during rifle season.
Yeah.
During the late archery season, you can find them, but good luck killing them.
Right.
The guys that consistently kill them, in Oregon, it's legal to bait, and it is an effective way to do it. But even the guys that bait will tell you that it doesn't make killing the big ones. What I've noticed is, because we actually have a couple bait stations, just trying it out. I'm just learning about it. Dude, the big bucks don't touch it. In fact, most of the time, they don't even come within 20 yards of it. They'll stand back there like 40 yards and just stare at it. So you're mostly just getting the does in there. So the best buck action I have right now on camera is just some random trails that they must like to cruise. And
weird, because they don't pattern real well.
No, I know. That's what I'm trying. There's a couple spots we have cameras that almost every day we got a daylight buck on. Now, it's not the biggest bucks we have, but they're bucks.
Right.
So I don't know if it's just still learning. These are very difficult creatures to pattern. They're not like, dude, whitetail hunting's different. First of all, whitetail hunting, if you're anywhere decent, there's magnitudes more deer. Like the places I've been in Kansas and Illinois and Mississippi, there's a lot of deer. And where I'm hunting these blacktails, there's probably legitimately 8 to maybe 10 does on that entire place.
Right.
And then you're getting fluctuating a dozen different bucks fluctuating in and out of there on their own schedule at their own times, So but
the buck to doe ratio on a mature deer, and that number goes even further down. And a lot of those, I think the big blacktail, they just don't ever get seen. It's just unfortunate, but it's kind of neat too, because now you guys are adapting to like a whitetail style into the blacktail stuff, which can be highly effective depending on where you set. And if you can bait, then that's even better, because it might give you a better opportunity to see something. Like Shannon's down in Oklahoma right now, hunting his property that he's got down there, and he's sent pictures of some massive whitetails that he's had come in on his trail cameras. He killed a buck the other day, which is a nice buck, but it's not the giant that he's looking for. But it's it's just one of those things where even the whitetails they're not the big bucks. They're a little leery. I mean, that's why guys put in so much time sitting in a tree stand to kill, a real big, massive buck. I think he's happy with the one he killed, but it wasn't his target buck going in. But it is kind of neat to then take that same style and tactic and move it up here and see if it works here. I can tell you that the spot and stock down there doesn't work that well.
What's that?
I can tell you that the spot and stock down there does not work that well.
No.
Especially because it's so open when moving through that.
Yeah.
You can't take our techniques and implement them down there. It just doesn't quite work the same.
Spot and stock blacktails, you could kill these mature bucks in velvet the first week of archery season, the first few days of archery season. You could totally do it. But now that they bumped our season a week later, it's going to get tougher because they're pretty much rubbed by then. But like if you go back and like read Cameron Haynes's book and some of his old success in the blacktails, a lot of those bucks he was killing were in velvet.
Yeah.
I know he kills a lot of really nice bucks out of a tree stand now, and those are late season. But those bucks are fairly vulnerable when they're velvet to spot and stock. But if you just try, like yesterday, I have a rifle tag too, and I went and hunted this place that's just all timber and reprod that I know there's really good bucks. And it was a stormy day, and I was creeping around there still hunting. And I'm a pretty good still hunter. Like, been doing it my whole life. But dude, those things catch you from like 100 yards away, and they are freaking gone. Like I kept jumping deer no matter how hard and how sneaky I was. And I'm like, this is frustrating. This is not going to work on a big buck. Like he's going to hear me coming. There's no freaking way.
Right.
But it can work. I've had it work, but yesterday it just wasn't happening for me. So I ended up hiking out, but
yeah, it's tough. Deer are interesting. I mean, they're a totally different ball game than elk, and there's so many different species, and you hunt them in so many different ways, mule deer, whitetail, blacktail, axis, coos. Like you start throwing them all in there, and there are similarities, but they all have something different about the technique that you're going to use to try to kill them. Well, I mean, I guess that a lot of that depends on if you're using a bow or a rifle. But they're fun.
I think the easiest. Well, I'll leave whitetail out because I've only killed a few of them with my bow, and I'm just not a whitetail guy. But out west, the easiest buck to kill with a bow is a mule deer.
Mule deer, yeah, especially if you're patient.
Killing a giant mule deer, okay, that's different. But that's just hard finding them.
Right.
Once you find them, they're not the hardest deer to kill. So
no,
they're hard, but they're not the hardest. That's for sure.
Yeah. Especially during the rut, they'll stand there and stare at you and tell you within 50 yards of them if they're rutting. If the doe's not spooked and she's not going anywhere, they'll just sit there and look at you. And if they take off, they usually go a little ways and turn around and look at you again.
Exactly. They hop, look back.
Right.
Blacktails, when they see you, they are freaking out of there, man. Those deer that I spooked yesterday, I'm like, dude, what are you so scared of? This place I was hunting, I don't think has been hunted. It's kind of landlocked. And I'm like, dude, what in the hell are you so scared of? Like, I cracked one limb and just didn't stop. Yeah, just like out of there. I'm like, God, this is hopeless.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny.
So we had some chats prior to elk season.
We did,
and I wanted to connect with you because we tried to meet up. We tried so many times, but I was like on a quest.
You were on a mission.
I was on a mission, and I was frustrated, and we did not connect. But I thought it'd be good to connect and chat some, kind of recap your season, see how it went. Before we do that, I'm going to take the sweatshirt off. I'm about ready to sweat my nuts off. Hold on.
Yep.
Let's start backwards though, because when I was in Montana, I was, dude, this is the funny thing. I was sitting on the mountain in Montana. The Altitude Show is brought to you by GoHunt.com. GoHunt is the hunting company. Anything that you need for hunting out west, you can find at GoHunt.com, whether that be their world-class gear shop. They have all the best brands vetted by their amazing hunters that work at GoHunt. Trust me, it's the best brands. I do almost all of my hunting shopping on GoHunt.com. But also just their research tools. Like the whole year, you should be doing research, whether that be studying their maps or reading articles from the likes of Brady Miller or Trail Kreitzer, or looking up your drawing odds in various states and when to put in. There's so much information, and it's a great resource. Go to gohunt.com, use my code altitude, and you'll get 20% off on just about everything I just mentioned. But you should become an insider. When you become an insider, you can get access to all of these things. So go to gohunt.com, use my code altitude for 20% off. And I ended up getting a bar of service, and I get a alarm message from a 201 number or something crazy.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here at X amount, 8,500 feet or something, listening to Dave Brinker altitude over a dead bull, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, who in the hell is this? Oh, Cory Ford. I'm like, I don't know. I didn't know you got an Idaho tag. And then I'm thinking, maybe I did know that. So let's chat that a little bit. What happened in Idaho?
Yeah, I had a B tag, a decent unit over there for elk. I had a deer tag too, but it was in the Frank Church, and that hunt just didn't. It kind of fell through my ability to go. Which, looking back now, I actually had the time because, surprisingly enough, like I took a severance package right in the middle of my Idaho to leave the company I was with, and I actually then had the time to go, but unfortunately, all the plans that I had previously made earlier in the summer, I had to back out on. So anyway, a couple buddies of mine from Tall Timber Productions, Brian and Corey, and there were two other guys they're doing a project this fall called Elk Obsession. They drew a bunch of really good tags. They all had several elk opportunities for the fall, and we had been talking about trying to figure out a way to do a hunt. And originally we were talking in Arizona, but based on their schedule, Corey Toombs works for Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, and Bryant works for Dana Boots, and so they've got a pretty busy show season in January, February as well. So we had to back off the Coos hunt, and they said, "Why don't you come to Idaho? If you got a tag, let's just do the hunt there, and we can film." And so I reached out to Shannon to see what his schedule was, and unfortunately, he had already had this Oklahoma hunt planned, and so his time was limited. So I asked another buddy of mine, Henry, if he wanted to come along and try to help film and get content, and so we were able to pick him up a deer tag. So we had the four of us head over there with 3 elk tags and 2 deer tags in our pockets, and the plan was to go in for 10 days to an area that you kind of had to dirt bike into, and then from there hike the rest of the way. So we got over there and got in, and opening morning, actually on the ride in, one of the other guys found a giant 6-point, probably 315 bull, nice bull, and so he knew where they were going the next morning. So they ended up getting up the next morning, killing that bull. They found another herd that had 2 legal bulls in it, and they said, "Here, they sent me a pin because we ended up camping in 2 different spots, so we were separated out in 2s." And they sent a location of where they last saw those elk, and so the next morning I got up and hiked in there just prior to daylight, and we're hunting at like 8,500, 9,000 feet. The highest peak around there is a little over 9. It's all high country. It's old burn stuff. You're basically mule deer hunting those elk, which is a very interesting thing to do because it's so used to having thick stuff for cover, and your bugle doesn't go nearly as far as you would want it to. And so if you want that time of year, you can still bugle those bulls and locate them. Well, that morning I didn't have to because one of the bulls, the two bulls that were in that bunch were just screaming their heads off. And I started to make an approach, and before I knew it, it was over before I even had an opportunity to get 15 steps off the trail that I was on, because some guy in the side-by-side, another ridge over, was coming up a trail, and they heard that, and they just absolutely do not want to be near those trails. So they busted out, but I kind of made tabs on the direction that they were going. So fast forward 4 days later, and Emily had gone home by that point. Brent and Corey were still hunting, and I was basically running solo, and I was now camping with them, and we split in the morning, and I went one way to go try to work my way around the ridge to be able to glass into where the last place that I saw those elk was, and it took me the better half of the first part of the day to get back there, and I ended up spotting a cow about 1 p.m., like a little over 1,000 yards away. So I worked in a little closer, and ended up picking up another cow and then a calf, and then I just kept working down. I got to 662. I spot a bull, he's just a little crab 5-point, which is pretty much what I expected to find in that herd. And started working down in even I'm like, oh, 662. I mean, I could dial this and shoot from here, but as you know, and you've said before, like you're a bow hunter. Like, don't settle for 662 in an average shot if you feel like you can get closer. So I just kept working my way down and got into position. It ended up at basically 445, where I couldn't go any further without the ability for them to see me and or hear me, because it was a pretty big draw and they were on the hillside across from me in a straight line. It was 445 yards, but as it dropped down and up, it was probably more like 800 yards. So I set up there and of course I'm by myself, so I'm trying to self-film this whole thing, and I get my camera out and I get it all set up, and I find the elk and I go to hit the record button, and all it does is take a picture. So what? That's not what it's supposed to do. Hit the button again, another picture, hit the button again. I'm starting getting frustrating. 10 minutes goes by and I'm fiddle farting around with my damn camera, and the bull walks off in behind some trees on the hillside. And now I'm pissed at myself because I was more concerned about getting video than I was about getting the shot. And so I throw my camera back in my backpack. I grab my little Razor Mini spotter from my pack, and I set it up on my tripod, and I just throw my all-in adapter on that. So now I'm running, basically a digiscope setup. And I set it up on those elk, and I spent the next 30 minutes picking that area apart, and I lost every single one of them on the hillside. And then finally I picked up another cow, and then a calf, and then boom, here's a bull. And I glanced at him real quick. I saw what looked like a little fifth come off the right side, and the left side, and I thought, okay, that's the bull. I get my all-in adapter on there, cell phone on him, set up. Bull moves in and stops, and there's a calf between him and me, and calf eventually moves off. And in the meantime, I just set up for my shot, in which I had just absolutely horrible rests. I ended up taking my bipod, and I got a Javelin bipod on the front. And first I tried setting, I got one of those Stealthy Hunter glassing pads. Tried to set that up to use that on this log in front of me. That wasn't working because I was too unstable sitting on the ground behind me. So I ended up putting the pad behind my back, leaning back against the log. And then I straddled my bipod across this log that was about, 4 or 5 inches in diameter. And that was the absolute best rest that I could get. And I had, with the new Razor HD 4000 geoballistics rangefinder, you can just hit the button and it'll tell you. I mean, I had it set up for my rifle. It told me what the MOA was. I came up, it was like 7.7. So I thought, I'll just dial to 8, and I'm going to hold high shoulder. And I'm really glad that I didn't dial any higher than that, because I ended up shooting high shoulder and dumped the bull. And when I got the scope back on the spot, he was completely out of sight, and elk were running over the hillside, but they were just running in different directions. They didn't know exactly what happened because I'm shooting suppressed. So they reacted way different than if I was shooting, open and, or with a muzzle brake or anything. So I'm watching these two elk, and they just start standing there looking down the hill. And then all of a sudden they just walked off, and I thought that I missed, because that bull, he would have ran off to my right, and I would have never seen him the way that he went. So I walk over to my cell phone and I tap on the video, and I go back and I scroll through everything, and to the time where I shot, and I hit that bull perfect high shoulder, and he dumped and rolled down the hill completely out of my view and piled up behind some trees. And that's why I couldn't see him. So it was a pretty interesting hunt that happened. It kind of unfolded trying to do self-filming and messing up what was actually a better opportunity on a decent bull. And I thought I had shot the 5-point till I dropped down the ridge, crossed the creek, and climbed up the other side about 400 vertical feet. And I got up to where he was at and started laughing, because I knew there was 2 bulls in there. There was a decent 5 and a small 4. And I started laughing at myself, and I was like, well, I guess I'm not going to have as much meat to pack out on this one, because I shot the little guy and not the big one. So, but I did get the shot on film, so that's good. I did kill the elk instantly, which is also good. And now it's just a matter of getting him out of there. So, trying to work on the bull on a significantly steeper than normal hillside is not fun, especially if you're solo, and of course trying to maneuver those things around. So I ended up having them all tied off with paracord and holding them up, supporting him so I could work on him. And then it just turned into a fiasco. And that night I got back to camp about 3 a.m. and I brought the head and the loose meat out with me on that first load. And then the next morning we went back in and packed the rest of him out. And Brent and Corey helped
What
on
time of
that.
the day did you shoot him?
I shot him at about 5 o'clock. So from when I first saw that group at 1, it took me the next 4 hours to basically work my way into position to get to where I could shoot him. I shot him about 5 o'clock. I got to him about 5:30, and that time of year, it was October 21st. It was dark at 7. So I had an hour and a half of time to basically, take a little bit of, cut whatever photos I could. I couldn't really do anything because he's laying upside down with his head piled in behind a tree and I couldn't move him. A little recap video, grab a little bite to eat, some water before I start working on him, and then get all my shit out and start going to town. Which is not easy when you're solo like that. If it's laying on flat ground, like my Oregon bull, I worked on that one solo by myself, pretty much by myself. And it was laying on a flat spot, which is a heck of a lot easier to manage than a really steep downhill. Cause if he rolls beyond the trees that are holding him up, it's like 400 vertical feet to the bottom in a creek. And there's nothing between him and the bottom that's going to stop him. So I almost wish he would have rolled all the way down there to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, ultimately it was, I killed a bull, which obviously was the goal. He's the smallest bull I've ever shot, which is kind of funny. I don't think that area is known for giant bulls, but we saw a lot of elk, which was good. I would have preferred it to be the 5-point. But I was happy with my shot, at 445 yards to aim high shoulder, shoot high shoulder. And I'm shooting a new rifle this year that I built over the last year or so. I've aimed it at 2 animals. I've hit 2 animals, killed 2 animals at this point. So I'm pretty happy with the performance of it. I built, kind of shouldn't say I built. There's a guy here locally in Vancouver. There's a barrel manufacturer called Helix 6, and the owner's name is John Beagle, and he will do custom builds for you if you want. But basically, I took him components and I said, here, I'll pair this up with one of your barrels. So he did, and he married the action to the barrel and mounted all my stuff up, put it in an MDT chassis. I'm running a Defiance anti-X short action, shooting a 7 SAUM, so completely not off the shelf build. I've got a Silencer Central Backcountry Bash 5 suppressor on it with a Vortex Razor HD LHT 3 to 15. So it's a pretty light setup. I can shoot off of a bipod. It's got a pick rail on the base, but I've got 2 Javelin mounts mounted on it. So yeah, it's a nice gun. It was the folding stock and the Stealthy Hunter rifle cover was a pretty slick setup to be able to pack the thing around. It's like carrying around a lunch pail. It doesn't weigh, it's like 8 pounds, so it's a super light, and that's with ammo and everything in it. So it was nice, but man, that thing, it shoots like a dream. I couldn't be more happy with the way that it's performed so far. But yeah, so that was Idaho. We ended up for that same day, actually, we reaching back and forth with Brent and Corey, and they killed a buck that day. So now we had 2 elk and a deer in camp, which is pretty good. And to get it all of it on film, I think was pretty awesome too. So they'll come out with that later in the year.
Cool adventure that you had too. Just losing them 4 days earlier, relocating them, and I don't know, man. I love. Here's what I've decided about myself. I love camping with people, but I love hunting by myself. Mm-hmm. And I love it when you grind and grind and grind by yourself and you solve all your own problems and you end up being successful and you're standing over that elk and it's like wild. You're like in the middle of Idaho or Montana or wherever you are. And it's just you and the frickin' 600-700 pounds of shit laying before you.
Right.
And you got to figure out how to get that thing out and how to deal with it. I mean, it's a very primitive experience that's not for the faint of heart, especially when they're on a steep hill like that. I had the same experience in Montana, and I've had it many times before where you have to problem solve. Like my bull in Montana died exactly like that. And if you look at the picture on my Instagram, like I had to take pictures of him laying upside down. I literally sat on him, which is like the most redneck picture ever. But I couldn't. I had to sit on him and like kind of hold it. I couldn't move him, you know.
Right.
And but I ended up using those trees to my advantage. Like I used them to like, you know, wedge his horns in when I was trying to go in the neck and tie his legs off, and you just figure it out. But the thing is like, at least I've learned my lesson is you have to like not be in a hurry, because even like your situation where you have 2 hours left of daylight, you know, a lot of guys would be freaking out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like whatever relaxes you, get a snack, you know, send some messages, eat, drink some water, start a fire.
Yeah.
Something that like, you know, okay, I have time, you know, as opposed to just taking your freaking, especially like a Havilon, and just start gouging the damn thing, trying to get it done before dark. And oh my God,
Right.
it's like you just take your time and you get to camp when you get to camp. I was lucky. I shot that bull at 11 o'clock in the morning. So we had it entirely out by the time it got dark. But I've also had situations where I killed it dark and I had to deal with it then. You just, but I don't know about you, dude, but I personally love that. I love that feeling. I love that feeling. And I've over recent years, I've tried to film just on my cell phone, but like as much of that experience as I can. And oftentimes during the winter, when I'm during the off season, I'll go back and watch those videos over and over and over again, because I love that feeling so much. I'll try to refeel it, like what it was like walking up on that bull, or, you know, talking to my camera about recapping it. I don't know. I just like reliving those experiences.
Yeah. Well, it's so weird because, you know, for so long now I've hunted, because we try to film everything, you know, I've hunted with, you have to have somebody over your shoulder in most scenarios. And so you're never really solo. And Shannon and I will do a lot of back and forth. You know, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And we'll walk through the scenarios. You know, so sometimes it's just looking for confirmation on the decision that you're going to make. And sometimes it's legitimately like, are you seeing something that I'm not seeing here? Like, you know, give me a second perspective. So when you're doing this, you know, and you're self-filming, which is really almost impossible to do for archery elk in the coast. So, you know, there's no reason to even really try that. But in this scenario, I had the opportunity, and I didn't have anybody else to run my thought processes through. It was like, the onus is on you to make the right decision. And I mean, I panicked at 662 for a second, thinking, you know, I need to take the shot. I should set up right here. I can dial this in and take this shot. My rangefinder will tell me exactly where to dial my scope. Like, but I knew that wasn't the right. Again, I mean, through my head goes the same thoughts that you have. It's you're a freaking bow hunter, man. You killed your elk in Oregon at 13 yards. If you can't get closer than 500 yards to these elk, then you need to just do shit up and walk up the hill and leave, you know, and that's the reality. So it's just, but how are you going to get down there? Okay, look, you know, pay attention to the terrain, the topography. How can you work when the elk are doing their thing? What can you do? And I already realized these elk are very, very wary of people, and their hearing over there it's wide open, so they can hear things from forever away. You know, their ability to see something moving on the hillside at 1,000 yards is impeccable. I mean, it's just like, boom, they're locked on you if you move wrong. Um, so it's more of a challenge than us moving through the coastal timber here, where you feel like you can get away with all kinds of things. And that's probably why you kill elk at sub 20 yards quite often. Over there, you couldn't. And so I had to make all the right decisions to get down to what I felt was my last stand, my last opportunity to get before I was completely exposed, and I actually had a harder shot because the hill rolled off from where I was right down to the creek bottom, and it got steeper and steeper. And I already had a hard enough time shooting across because they were slightly elevated from me. So, yeah, it's a little more rewarding at the end that, like, okay, every decision that I made, including pulling the trigger, was just me, and it resulted in exactly what you're hoping for. Now, does that mean that I want to hunt solo all the time? No, because I love hunting with people. That's part of the experience of it too. You know, I enjoy spending time with other guys out in the woods, but in certain scenarios like that solo thing, I think you might actually be more successful doing it that way than trying to take somebody else's input into it, because it might sway your decision, even though you might think in your gut, like, I know this is what I need to do.
Yeah, I think there's no question about it, because I think it and I don't know this for a fact scientifically, but I think it's not that your partner's decision or your decision is right or wrong as much as it is the deliberation takes too long.
Right.
And I think when you lose time in those moments, time's like one of the only benefits that you have. Like if you finally got the wind right and there's like this hole to make a move on this bull, you have a little bit of time and he's vulnerable. And if you stand there for 45 seconds going, I think we should do this. Well, I think we should do this. I don't know. God, da, da, da. I think that's the biggest problem. It's not as much as I'm always right or he's always wrong or whatever. But I got to be honest with you, man. There's very few people that I actually enjoy walking in the woods with from a hunting, like actually killing perspective. I love going out outdoors with all my buddies, or whatever, you know, but like hunting and like when you're trying to actually kill the bull, it's very hard to find someone that you jive enough with to where you're gonna. I'm just not as successful. Nearly, statistically, I've killed most of the animals that I've been successful in killing have been by myself, or with somebody, with somebody who's just taking, that's just with me, right? And it's not because I'm always right, because really, believe me, I am wrong a lot more than I'm right. But I think it's just I make decisions quick and I go with them. I fail fast, I fail fast, I fail fast, I fail fast, and I keep going, and eventually it pays off, right? And I know guys that are really methodical, and I don't hunt well with people like that, only because I'm more of a gut guy. If my gut feels it, I just do it. I don't try to scientifically think through it. I'm going, and it's going to work or it's not. But like I said, I've just come to learn I don't really like camping alone. I think it's kind of boring.
Yeah,
I think it's
very much so.
I do think it's good for the soul, and you should do it every once in a while. But I don't know, man. I like coming back to camp, and that's when I think the real camaraderie is, like telling stories and like, oh man, you know, I screwed up on this and blah blah blah, and like hanging out. It makes the night go by fast. Like in Montana, when I was in my tent or my teepee, it got dark at, like you said, it was 7, and then legal shooting light I think was also at 7 or 7:30. So it was like 12 hours of darkness laying on your air pad in the middle of the mountains, and like with no cell service, so you're not like watching a movie, right?
I downloaded movies to my phone before I left.
Dude, I tried to do that and it didn't frickin' work. It went to my iCloud, so I still couldn't get them. So I was like laying there, like, I mean, there's only so many times you can look through your photos or, you know, send a message on Delorum. You know, you run out of shit to do. I should have brought a book. But it's just better, I think, when you got someone in the teepee with you. You can start a fire and just bullshit, right?
Yeah, just tell stories, whatever. I mean, even just recap the day and then talk about what you're going to do tomorrow is that. I think that's part of the enjoyment of it too. One of the funny things about that is when Emery and I first went in, we'd had a discussion about packing our shelter in, and we didn't take it. Both of us thought the other guy was bringing it, and we showed up without a shelter.
What?
Yeah. So luckily we had like a 6 a.m. tarp that's like a 10 by 12. And I had 100 feet of paracord. So we fashioned a little kind of a half over, at least cover just in case it rained. And then each of us had Tyvek to throw down underneath of our pads. But then we found that there was an outfitter's tent, or an old outfitter camp, like 150 yards away. And I found an old cooler that I popped open, and there happened to be some tarps inside of there, some old ones. And so one of the tarps was halfway usable. So I pulled the tarp out, and then we redid and it was probably 15 by 15. So we ended up laying that down on the ground and then laying our tieback on that. So then we could bring all of our gear into the shelter. But yeah, I mean, we had this thing tied off to the dirt bikes that we rode in on, and it was a total shit show for the first 3 days as far as the shelter goes, but we made it work, and luckily it was dry, so we didn't have to deal with any rain. It was cold, but it was just, we didn't have any rain to deal with. But yeah, lesson to be learned about making sure that you pack a shelter.
Dude, that could have been really bad.
Could have been, yeah, exactly. If it started snowing or something, which, I mean, it was cold enough in the nights, it was getting down into probably the high 20s, low 30s,
Oh wow.
It was pretty funny.
I now always have a tarp. I never go anywhere without a tarp. Even if I have my teepee, Or like when I
Yeah.
leave the teepee in the morning, I still keep a tarp just because you break a leg, you never know what can happen. You need to be able to set up something to where you can be protected until you can figure it out.
Yeah, no, I've used my tarp. I mean, I was hunting. We had John Stallone and his cousin Anthony were up on hunting the coast with us one year, and one of those September rainstorms about 3 or 4 years ago, and it just absolute torrential downpour middle part of the day. And John and I grabbed my tarp, pulled it out, threw it up over the top of us, and we just literally sat underneath of that thing on a bull. I mean, we had been hunting a bull. Yeah, he was probably within 200 yards of us, and we sat under that thing for an hour or two until it finally let up a little bit. You know, I mean, it's just such a nice tool to have, especially with the stuff that you can get these days with the Sil Nylon or the Dyneema. You know, it's so light and it takes up such. I mean, the tarp takes up less than the size of my game bags. You know, for elk. So it's like, why wouldn't I have that as a resource? You know,
it's just a nice peace of mind. It's the same thing I always have. Even when I'm archery hunting on the coast, I always have top and bottom rain gear. And I usually, in the early archery season, I don't carry puffy pants. But anytime after late September, I have puffy jacket and pants. So I have rain gear, puffy jacket and pants, and a tarp. I know that seems extreme to some people. They're, oh, you're heavy. I don't care. Yeah. If I fall and break my leg and I can't get a hold of anybody, I'm going to survive. I could probably survive a couple days. So I'll be fine.
So what's the weight of that? 2 pounds?
Yeah, it's nothing. It's nothing.
If you can't, I mean, even if you're backpacking in, you know, and your pack is 50 pounds, and then because you brought that, you know, 52 pounds, it's like if you can't carry that extra 2 pounds,
you have a problem.
Something's wrong. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So
for
the comfort and safety.
The problem is when you add like 10 2-pound things, right?
Correct.
Then you got a pack that's 70 pounds.
Right.
And,
yes, exactly.
In Montana, I knew I didn't have to hike in terribly far, like a mile or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so my pack was so heavy, dude. Oh my God, it sucked. But I brought some comforts. I don't care. Yeah. Like I brought 2 pillows, stuff like that. Like, yeah, it was great. I was really, really cozy.
I'm a big fan of my little Helinox ultralight chair. You know, it weighs a little over a pound, and people are like, "Oh, you fucking chair." I'm like, "Yeah, you just wait until I'm sitting leaned back in this chair with my weight off my feet, and you're going to be wishing you had brought one too." You know, the combination of that with the Ryan's glassing pad to keep you warm on the backside is pretty sweet.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, dude, a chair in the backcountry is so nice. Last year in Colorado, I brought a chair. I didn't bring a chair this year, but there's nowhere flat to sit. You're never comfortable. And if you're going to stay for any amount of time and you literally can't get comfortable sitting down, there's a lot of value to that. Just taking the strain off your back. Sitting down glassing. It's so much better.
Yeah. Or take your boots off when you get back to camp, sitting in a chair, or putting your boots on in the morning when you're sitting in a chair. You know, eating your breakfast or your dinner and just sitting there relaxed. It's so much nicer than like leaning over on your elbow on your sleeping pad trying to eat a meal.
Oh,
you know,
I hate that. I hate that. I really do.
Horrible. Yeah.
Especially when you do it, when you're in there for 12 hours, you're supposed to just lay there and put your elbow on the freaking ground and like stare at your.
Yeah. At the side wall of your tent. Yeah. So it was, there's those little things. And when you start, I mean, when you do it enough too, you realize what gear is really important, you know, and thanks to you, I finally got my headlamp replaced. So I was able to truly give that thing a test, breaking down that bull and, you know, that 3,600 milliamp battery and that Peaks headlamp was a dream. Cause I think with my Coast headlamp, I would have probably had to swap out at least one battery, in that amount of time, and I never did have to change batteries from the time that I started working on that elk at it is probably around about 7 o'clock when it was too dark to see anything until I got back to camp at 3 a.m. And I just ran it on low and medium the whole time. But, all the same, like they're just a testament to good gear and having things that are, you know, it's a comfort thing, you know, like you said, what you do when you kill the elk, I throw on some music on my phone. I got all your music downloaded in my Amazon Music app, and, you know, I just had a random playlist going, and then all of a sudden, you know, here Dave Brinker pops up. I'm like, all right, I could literally, if I had to, I could work on this thing until daylight and not have the care in the world. Dude, as far as anything goes.
That's really funny you mention that, because I usually don't do that. But when I was working on that Montana elk, I turned on music. It was awesome. Like, like, this is awesome. I could do this all day. And you know what song, what came on when I was doing, I put it on shuffle or whatever.
Yeah.
The frickin' Dances with Wolves themes comes on, dude. It was awesome. It was like so fantastical. It was crazy.
That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is though. I
music.
mean, your abilities, like, you think about if you go into an auto shop and there's guys working on cars, they got music on in the background. You go into a metal shop and they're working on projects. There's music on in the background. Like, you're working on an elk. Like, you're breaking it down. The last thing you need to do is hear. As long as you're not in grizzly country, I'm not worried about. We hadn't heard wolves howling all that week, so I wasn't worried about predators. And plus, I just don't really think they're going to mess with you too much when you're sitting there working on an elk, unless it's in your grizzly country. Then that totally changes the game. Like in
Yeah, for
Kodiak,
sure.
when I killed a couple of blacktail in Kodiak, and it was like, do not make a noise because I want to hear everything running at me from 100 yards away at least. Like, it's a totally different situation there. But in this situation, it's nice, it's comforting, it's relaxing. If you're by yourself, it's just one of the ways to fill the noise in your head and put some tunes on, and it's like, this is what I'm doing for the next 3 or 4 hours and breaking this elk down. So it was pretty sweet.
Yeah, I think finding something like that's super important, whether it's starting a fire or turning on music or turning on. I actually, I also, because I had a little service where I killed that bull, I put on a podcast like the last half. I listened to music for a while, and then I had a podcast on, and it's just calming. It's like, okay, I'm not in a hurry, because there's this natural instinct that I'm in a hurry. I got to get this done as fast as possible, and it's bad safety wise, because you start cutting yourself when you do shit like that. You start making bad decisions, and that's like the worst thing that can happen. But also, it's just keeping the meat clean and thinking through every step of what I'm doing, and also it's just, you should enjoy that moment. They're fleeting, and maybe we get, for a really good hunter, get 30 of those in their life, right? So think about that. 30 moments in your whole life of 90 years or 80 years like that.
Yeah.
It's like, you should enjoy it. I think the reason most people rush through it, and the reason I would usually be rushed, is you want to start getting the work done, right? You're like, okay, I got a long night ahead of me. And I get that. But also, that's exactly why you should probably slow down and be like, okay, first I need to do this. First I need to do this. And then, I'm going to get to camp late, but I'm just going to take my time getting to camp. I'm not going to break a leg. I'm going to find the easiest route out of here. It's dark. So what? It doesn't matter. It's just But in grizzly country, I agree with you. Like, where I was hunting in Idaho, is grizzly country, and the bull that my buddy Josh killed with me that opening day, the next day, when Josh and his buddy, we took a load, we caravanned the entire elk about part of the way back. It was like 4.5 miles to the truck. We caravanned the elk, I don't know, maybe a mile from where he shot it, maybe less, I don't know, up the hill, and left it. And then the next day, Josh and his buddies went back in there to get it, and I actually kept hunting. I went hunting somewhere else. But when they got in there the next day, there was a grizzly bear at the meet. They didn't see it. They didn't see it, but there was fresh tracks all around it. We actually camped there the night before that, and there was no tracks. There was a grizzly bear had found that elk, and it was freaking creepy. They got the hell out of there. Yeah, when you add stuff like that in, dude, and I've killed a bull solo in grizzly country before in rifle season, but it was still grizzly country, and I killed it an hour before dark. And I'll tell you what, I rushed that one. I didn't get back to the truck until well after dark, but at least I was on the trail after a little while. But at first I was busting brush in the dark in grizzly country with a quarter on my back, and I was pretty creeped out. You can't get around that.
Yeah,
I have friends that don't worry about grizzlies. Mark Livesay is like, yeah, man, if I got killed by a grizzly, that's a good way to go. And I'm like, I don't think it's a very good way to go.
Yeah, but Mark's llamas are going to get eaten before he does. So
I'm like,
he's got decoys out there.
I don't want to get eaten by a bear.
No,
I'm not. It's not something that I want to go through. So
I'd rather get shot and have it be over with right away than get eaten alive.
Yeah, no, thank you. You know what? I did an Instagram post the other day, and I said, "What's your worst fear when you're on the mountain alone?" And I got all kinds of answers. The most answers I got was skinwalkers, which I don't even really know what that is. Do you know what that is?
I don't. That sounds like something from Game of Thrones or whatever, though. The
I'm
White
Googling it.
Walkers.
Skinwalker.
Skinwalker?
Definition. Yeah, dude, so many people said that.
Never even heard of
Definition.
that.
Skinwalker is, in Navajo culture, a skinwalker is a type of harmful witch who has the ability to turn into, possess, or disguise themselves as an animal.
Yeah, definitely not scared of that. It's not in my top 100.
That was the number one thing.
Oh my goodness.
And I didn't put mine, but so when bears, yeah, for sure. If you're camped in grizzly bear country, for sure, that's creepy.
Yeah.
But most of the time in those states like Idaho and Montana, especially in September and early October, you know what, for some reason just freaks me out. And I had this happen in Montana a couple weeks ago, is moose running around my teepee and like being clumsy like moose are because they're kind of dumb and just freaking stampeding the teepee. Like I had a bull below my camp running a cow and like, "Rah, wah," and you can hear them and walking. I'm like, dude, please don't stampede me, you dumb thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that would suck.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be
You're
a tough
just
one.
you're just laying vulnerably on the ground, and usually I got earplugs in. I can't hear what's going on. All of a sudden, you get a hoof in your chest. Ow!
Right. Yeah, that wouldn't be good at all. Yeah, that's a good question, though. I mean, I would be curious to see, what most people's fears are. I can't really say that I have like a legitimate fear when I'm out there. It's just nothing has ever been that concerning to me. I haven't hunted in grizzly country. Well, I mean, I take that back. I mean, I was in Kodiak, so they don't get any bigger than that.
The worst.
Yeah,
Yeah.
3 deer in the early snowstorm, in early November up there. I mean, that couldn't get any worse than that. But that was
Right.
maybe the only time. Like I remember Jake Havlicek and I were packing one of my deer out, and it got dark on us, and we had a long ways to go from this really deep basin. Jake's with X amount of gear, and we were bombing along, and I had music playing on my phone. We start to come up this creek draw that's all snowed over, and we're getting towards the top, and it's starting to widen. It's starting to open up, and I had to remember following bear tracks. Like we were walking the opposite direction of them going into this basin back where I shot this deer. And I thought, you know what? That means that the bear is now the direction that you're walking. You're actually following its tracks. So I turned the music off, and I was like, you know what, Jake? I think we probably need to use our ears in this situation. And I don't think that bear is going to care that I'm playing music, because he's probably just like, oh, dinner bell, I'm going to eat some music. and now he knows that we're here. And so I went ahead and shut the music off so we could actually listen. And Jake was like, he's like, I'm actually glad you did that, because it kind of freaked me out a little bit, because he was pretty worried about the bears. And it just changes things when it's dark. If it's daylight, it's not as big of a deal. They probably look at you from a distance, even though they got shitty eyesight. They probably still won't necessarily charge you, but dark, it gets a little leery. But that might be the only time I was ever actually really wigged out in the woods.
I don't get wigged out really ever at all unless I'm in. I have an edge grizzly country, and I hunted by myself for several days in Idaho and grizzly country. Fine. It's just I have a little bit more of an edge. Like I'm really more on alert. And then it's just laying in the teepee at night. My thoughts can get the best of me sometimes. But during the day or even walking in the dark, I almost have nothing.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I mean, I keep my eye out though. You still are at the mercy of nature.
Right.
Like.
Yeah.
I've been lucky to never have look behind me and see a mountain lion or something like that. So
right.
I have been charged by a black bear. Oh, for sure. I almost always carry a pistol now. And then obviously in rifle season, I almost always have my rifle in my hands. I rarely carry it in my backpack unless I'm just packing in during the daylight. But if I'm actually hunting, I usually have it in my hands.
Yeah. Yeah. Even in Oregon, even on the coast, I pack a little pistol, just to have. You just never know what may or may not happen. So.
No, and in Oregon, well, at least historically, like a lot of the problem was you used to walk into big marijuana grows on the coast. Like that was the game cops down here where I am would always tell me, like, screw bears and cougars and all that stuff. Like what you're worried about is walking into marijuana grows that are booby trapped or guarded by illegal immigrants that are also selling drugs.
Right.
Now,
that's what
they've cleaned a lot of that up now.
Yeah, we'll transport pistols to Arizona when we go down there and hunt goose deer because you're so close to the border down there. Even though
Oh
those illegals
yeah.
don't want anything to do with you, but you get one of those mules running stuff across the border, and that's a totally different story than just somebody just trying to flee to America.
Yeah, dude, there's a little bit of an edge down there. Like the first time I went down there, I really was like, is this safe? And then after a couple times you realize it's really safe. It's just, you may run into somebody, and actually people I was hunting with did run into people. I never did. I ran into a ton of paraphernalia, but never.
Oh, tons. Didn't they end up having to call Border Patrol or something on some guys that they saw that they were filming?
Yeah, I think
at one
so.
point, I think they did.
Yeah, there was like a guy running down a road. I remember vaguely or something, but for the most part, you don't see anybody. I've seen them. I've seen them walking in my binoculars. Like I've spotted them before, but I don't think most of them, even if you ran into them, they're not going to. They're just people trying to get into the United States. Yeah. But the drug runners, I have had them fly over me in like little airplanes and stuff like that.
Right.
On the Mexico side, not on the Arizona side, because if they did that on the U.S. side, they'd probably get shot down or something.
Yeah.
I hunted down by where did I fly into? Hermosillo. Down by Hermosillo years ago for coos deer. And that was a little creepy, because you're hunting amongst some of the most powerful cartels in the world. And like the guy we were with was like paying off ranchers with cash and stuff. It seemed really shady. I'll never talked to him since, and would never go back. But it was you're like, okay, this is a little bit for a deer, really small deer. I'm good.
Yeah.
You gotta be picky down there.
Yeah, I think I'll more times than not. I think I'll take the coast in Oregon and chasing Roosevelts over most of that stuff.
So let's talk about your archery season, dude. Like, you guys had a good season, a rough season, a okay season. What was it?
It was an unorthodox season, one, because for the first time that I'm aware of, at least in the last probably 20 years, Shannon actually had to work a portion of the archery season early. So the second actual week of the season, he had to go back to work for 4 days. He took a new position with Intel as an engineer there, and
so I was wondering when he told me that, he's like, "Yeah, I got to work the 17th through the something." I'm like, "Dude, what?"
It was like trying to remember what the dates were. It was like the 7th through the 11th or something like that. Some 4-day stretch that he had to work, which was rare. It's very unusual for him to not have the entire month off.
Right.
And so he left, and that first week was real slow for everybody from a bugling perspective. And I think that, the more and more people we've talked to, it seemed like they were having a very similar scenario as us. Like it was very quiet in the woods for the first half. I heard they got guys that would be out into August, and there was quite a bit of bugling activity going on there. Like the rut touched off a little early, but then there was that big lull in the middle. And so we had, Shannon out until whatever day it was. I think that he came back. I think it was the 11th. I go back and look because it's actually the day he came back to the woods is the day I killed my bull. And then Brad was coming in a day after that on that following or that Saturday after Shannon was coming back on that Friday. And so I had basically a week or like those 5 days where I was in camp by myself because all the other guys had left and went home for a short time because it was just so slow in the woods. And it just so happened to be that one night before going to bed, I had found a herd not far from camp, and I could hear them at night, or just after dark. And so the next morning I was up in there, and they were up feeding, and I started, and there was a bull on the butts, and he started big one, and it's pretty early, so I'm not.
Even though I've been hunting for 40 years, I'm constantly failing and learning and failing and learning. And one of the things I do in the off season is I try to dig into as many resources as possible to become a better hunter. And one of those places is outdoorclass.com. On outdoorclass.com, you can learn from the likes of Randy Newberg, Remy Warren, and many, many other, Corey Jacobsen, many, many other amazing, amazing talents in the industry. And they teach you about their specific skill sets. For example, Remy Warren has a class on mule deer hunting, or Randy has a class on antelope hunting. Cory, elk calling, elk strategy. There's even cooking classes. It's basically the master class for hunting, and it's an amazing resource. We can all get better no matter what stage of your hunting path you're on. So go to outdoorclass.com, use code altitude. That is the code altitude for 20% off your subscription, and do it right now. It helps the show and it will help you. Thank you.
I've been excited about going after him, but I hear that bull bugle and then I hear another one 20 ways down the drainage bugle, and they start bugling back and forth to each other. And I know where this bull is at. He's going to drop down and go across the road. And so I just let him do their thing. Like, trust the process for what we do. Don't try to change anything, especially right in the middle of the season. You're not calling an audible in the middle of a play. And
Right.
so I let them get down to where I thought they were going. And mid morning, I worked my way down the road and I get to the spot where the road splits, and there's a bigger section of timber that I think that's where they're going to be at. And I had heard probably 6 or 7 bugles between the two bulls that morning. So I get down there and I go start to relocate these bulls, or one of them, and it was ghost town. There was nothing. And so I'm on Onyx looking at the map, trying to figure out like what's the most realistic route these elk had taken from here. And as I just started picking the area apart, working my way around these ridges, I end up locating a different bull that just happened to be, if I'm guessing, was on private when I located him. And so I had to get a little more pinpoint spot on. And so I worked into a couple different spots, relocated until I knew exactly where he was at. And sure enough, like I was pulling him off of private if I was going to kill this elk. So the whole time I'd leave the road, and between the road and where the private is, I've probably got about 400 to 500 yards of ground coverage before I run into the private stuff. And it's all marked. So I know I can't do that, which is just one of the massively powerful tools of something like Onyx or a mapping system that we have now, is the ability to know where those property lines are, and know exactly where you stand and how much room you have to work. So I start working down, and I dropped in on this bull. Right before I dropped in on the bull, I get a text from my buddy Jason, and he's like, asking me questions. I said, hey, I'm just getting ready to drop in on a bull. And he's like, go kill him. And from that time until the bull was laying on the ground dead, it was 19 minutes. And I dropped in. I worked down the hill. I located him one more time as I was working in, and he responded, fired back right away. I pushed in a little closer, and just like as we do, I would move, 50 to 75 yards at a time. I would make some kind of an elk noise. He would respond. I would push in a little closer, and I finally got to where I'm like, okay, if he's going to be in this opening, I bugle, then he's still a little further. So I push across the opening. So now he doesn't have a sight window that he can get to and stop and hang up. I get to the other side. I moan. He bugles back. I push in a little further, and I finally, I'm like, okay, I can't really go any further. And I just throw just a really, really short little locate bugle, and that bull fires back, and I can see him coming. And he's coming from about 150 yards. I'm a little elevated on him. And he comes up maybe 50 yards, and he starts raking a tree. So I just moaned, just gave him a little, dropped it off at the end, and boom, he left that tree and he started working up. He coming in, he stops and hits another tree. And all I can see is the tops of his antlers rubbing this tree, and he's down below me. Same thing. I just leaned off to between these trees that I had next to me. I just leaned in behind him and kind of aimed my bugle away from me. And I just gave him a little, and that was it. And as soon as I did that, he snapped and he walked up below me, and he was coming up this little trough that I couldn't tell was an actual trough because I see a log laying across the ground. So now all I can see is his head and his antlers coming through, and he's probably about 30 yards away, and he's just getting closer, and this thing parallels right towards me. And he gets to where that log was laying, and unbeknownst to me, the log was actually about 3 feet off the ground. So instead of ducking under it, he decided to go up and around it, and I had already drawn my bow. And I'm following him, and he starts to come up around that log, and he gets right up at the log level, and he literally walked into my sight picture. And I just remember my eyes getting really big because it was one of those like, it's like if you played baseball growing up and you got a guy that's been feeding you 90-mile-an-hour fastballs all day long, and then all of a sudden you're sitting on a changeup, and he throws like a 78-mile-an-hour changeup, and it's just slow motion coming at you. Your eyes get real big, and you take the biggest swing of your life. And that's what I felt like. I just remember my eyes going, "Oh my God, he's right there!" And this is just an absolute chip shot, 13 yards, just slightly quartered to. Put it right behind the shoulder, released, and he bolted, and he dropped down this little draw and came up the other side. And when he came up the other side, he was trying to work his way back uphill, and he just stopped, and he just fell over, and he hit the ground. And he kicked a couple times, and that was it. And I ranged from where he was at to where, or from where I was at to where he died, and it was 40 yards in a straight line. And it took seconds for that to happen. I walked down to where he was. I just sat there for a few minutes. And again, I was by myself in this situation. So I was making all the decisions on my own. Everybody else had left camp. Shannon and I were texting back and forth that morning, and he was heading down to another area that we were going to go to. And so I just told him, like, you go down there, I'll see what these bulls are going to do. But as soon as nothing happens, then I'll head your way. And that was the first two bulls. And then I ended up finding this third bull and then ended up killing him. But because I was solo, I tried to film everything with my little 360 camera on my chest, and it may or may not exist, the video. I'm going to have to take it to a computer guy and have him thing, because it shows that all the time is off, but it doesn't show the files on the camera. So I got to try to get that off, and hopefully it does. But yeah, he died, and I just sat there,
no.
And it'll be a great video if it's on there, which I'm hopeful that it is. But I just sat there and kind of in disbelief that it all happened that quick. But as you know, like when it happens in a scenario like that, especially when you're heavy calling and you're working in on these bulls, it can be over in an instant. So we just, I just stood there literally kind of in disbelief, and I walked over to where the bull was where I shot, and I found my arrow. I mean, that Valkyrie zipped right through him. Arrow was embedded in an old giant cedar stump. Pulled it out, it's covered in blood. It's got lung blood on it. I didn't need to know what kind of blood it was at that point because I could see the thing laying dead. So I walked over to him, and he's an average 5-point. He's not a monster by any stretch of the imagination, but he did exactly what I want an interaction. If it's a 350-inch bull that comes in like a total puss, then I'm less excited about that than I am killing a 200-inch 5-point that comes just screaming his head off, running in there wanting to kill you. I'd much rather have that interaction and lose 150 inches of antler than gain the 150 and not have a cool story to tell about the hunt. And that process was exactly what I was looking for. It's pretty much, go back to our last podcast, it was textbook exactly how we like the process to go down. It should be very quick when it does happen. And it was. But now I'm standing there over this nice 5-point with nobody but myself around. So I start sending out some messages to find out where everybody's at. And Shannon's already down south, and the guys that were in camp are still back in town because they're not coming out till the following day. And I text a couple of guys that I know that have been in the area, and one of them was there. So he came and was able to help out a little bit, but he's really green and he's never broke down an elk or a big game animal, one bear. And so it took a lot longer to do because I took that as an opportunity for kind of a learning moment for him, and kind of really methodically walk through the whole process. By the time we got it more or less broken down, I had another guy, his hunting partner actually had shown up, left work, and came up there because it was on Friday, so he bombed out after work. And then a girl that I know showed up that is local, and she came to help pack out too. So I ended up having the 4 of us, and it took 2 trips to get it out, but we did it. And an interesting thing too, average 5-point on the coast, and I got 278 pounds of meat off of it. That Rocky Mountain bull that I killed, I got 120 pounds of meat off of it. It's just such a drastic difference in the overall size of these things. It was 150 pounds of meat different. It's not like I left a bunch of scrap on the Idaho bull either. It was just they're just body wise, they are not the same compared to what we deal with these coastal Roosevelt bulls. So, but yeah, that was it. One arrow and done. And you couldn't have drawn up anybody. The only thing I could have done different was have somebody there filming.
Yeah.
And that's literally it. So
that's the risk you take hunting solo, I guess. It's really, really, really difficult to self-film in that coastal stuff. I mean, I don't know how maybe Remy could pull it off because he's like the master of self-filming. But,
yeah, it would be hard.
Rough.
Yeah, I mean, somebody like him or Timbernet, yeah, I mean, they've got ways of doing it, but I think you have to move so much and you have so many obstructions that it would be really, really challenging to do. I've thought just a monopod with like a stake end on it, with a little shovel kick out or something that you could step on to stick it in the ground and then just.
Yep.
The 360 camera was going to be my best bet, and I just had it behind my harness on my chest, and I just had it facing forward, so it would pick up everything at basically 170 degrees. At 13 yards, you're going to see the elk, which is good. At 30 yards, you wouldn't, but 13, you should be able to. So I just need to get into that car and see if I can't find somebody that can pull the files off there. I've had it happen once before on an Alaska blacktail hunt, Sitka blacktail hunt that we did, and some computer nerd was able to get the files off, and they existed. And here it appears as if they exist. It just doesn't. They're just not showing when I go through the files and look at everything. It films everything up into that day. So hopefully, because it would be nice. I mean, obviously, when you've got Angry Spike Productions and films and stuff need to be put out, it would be really nice to have the content. So I'm hopeful,
Yeah, films for a production company.
Yeah. YouTube channel that goes a year without anything on it isn't very good. And we did have, that there was no activity early on, but we did have activity after that. Shannon and Brad Croco, our other guy, they both passed up on decent 5 points, average 5 points. Shannon killed that big 300 plus inch bull last year. Brad killed a really nice 5 point last year. They both had meat in the freezer, so they weren't looking to just shoot an elk to just shoot an elk. Brad's never killed a true 6 point, so he was, of all the elk that he's killed, it's just never happened. So he was kind of holding out for that. We had one funny scenario of a bull that we were working in on that crossed this huge canyon and made this big effort to get around to him, and we dropping in on top of him, and there's a big herd of elk in there, and I see this bull working up out of this draw, and it sounded like we were hunting a good bull, and Shannon's shooter and I'm filming and Brad's got his bow just in case. And, I see this bull and it's just a little 5 point, just an average 5 point. So I said, I was like, it's an average 5 point. I turn around and look at Brad. I was like, average 5. And Shannon's like, what? Did you see it? And I said, yeah, it was just an average 5 point. He's like, are you serious? So he had his arrow knocked at that point. He throws it back in his quiver. And we're sitting there kind of BSing. Shannon's like, Brad, do you want to go shoot it? And Brad's like, nah, I really want to hold out for a 6 point. So, okay. So we decide, Shannon's like, well, let's just go over there and get some content. So we kind of not very aggressively work our way into this bull. We get over there and we're coming up underneath of where the last place that we think we can hear these bugles coming from. And there's a big bench up there. I'm filming. Shannon's up in front of me and he's just kind of working up through some salmonberry and he moans. This bull comes and I can see him walking through the salmonberry, and you can hear me on film going, "Shooter!" And I'm like, "Shooter!" And this bull comes up and he hits the edge of the salmonberry, and there's a little shelf that he has to walk across to get around where he's going to. Normally, we would expect him to push right through the salmonberry, but Shannon doesn't even have it. This bull circles around above us, and it gets to a stump that it can walk out on, and it walks out, and it looks right over the edge, and it's 10, 15 yards straight up the hill from us, looking straight down. And I'm just like trying not to make eye contact. I'm holding the camera, looking at the viewfinder, and I'm filming this thing. And I try to zoom in on him while I'm not like looking at the elk, and I get him fit in the screen. And that bull did not like, he's up there. He kind of looks at the three of us standing down there, and he boogies out of there. And as soon as he does, Shannon barks, and the bull doesn't even slow down, but he barks 2 more times. That bull stops. And he's hard quartered away at 30 yards, and Shannon guessed 40, and he draws back and shoots, and we didn't end up getting that elk. It busted when it took off, and he just guessed the range wrong. But he turns around and he's like, that was a freaking stud. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you, because this is probably like a 250 5-point, big, heavy, super dark horn. It is not like we figured out what it was. There was another little bull that was in there with the herd, and it was not the bull that I saw initially in this bull that came in. So there was two bulls, which was a super bummer, because this is a total shooter bull. I mean, he is a mature bull. And so the whole rest of the season, it was like, well, what do you think he is? Like, he's probably just an average 5-point, like everything became an average 5 after that. Because it was just the mistake of seeing the one bull and then going in non-aggressive and then having an opportunity that just kind of blew up. Because that's a dead elk in most scenarios if you're aggressively targeting that bull. But when you're just kind of going in, well, let's see if we can get some film on him,
yeah, if you're like, I don't know, maybe I'll shoot him. Usually you won't, because
right.
It's just for some reason it just you'll make mistakes, you'll rush, you'll be lazy, you won't have your weapon ready, whatever. Every time I've ever done that, it never works out. Never works.
You're not laser focused.
No,
it changes your mentality on it.
You're not going for the throat. Like, you're just not in it to win it. Just like any other sport. Like I don't know. We'll go out and try, see what happens. It's like, that's a shitty strategy.
Yep. You can't. I mean, it's like anything. You can't turn the light switch on and off in something like that, right? Whether it's basketball and you're at 20, you're like, oh, let's just start coasting. Like, no, if you do that, you're going to let the other team back in it, and half-faceted in that, the same thing, where this is exactly what happened. Like it was like you took the finger off the trigger, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I wasn't ready to shoot when it happened.
Right.
So, I of course I take a little blame, because the bull that I did see was an average 5-point. It was not the same bull. And it just, like, after the fact, after we kind of pieced it all together, we realized what had happened, because we heard something that sounded like, Dave, I shit you not, it was an exact replica of a hoochie mama about 30 yards below us. And we were like, how are there other hunters in here? There is no way. I mean, we were 1000% convinced that there was other hunters in there trying to work these bulls, or work this bull. And then what we ultimately realized is it was probably that bull that was cow calling, if you want, and sounded like that, because it was so exact to a hoochie mama that I kept looking behind me, thinking I was going to see other guys come in as we were approaching these elk. All three of us were completely convinced that there was other guys in there. And then all of a sudden, here comes this bull out of the bottom of the straw, and he's working up that side, and he stops, and he's raking a bush. And then, but the bigger elk was with the rest of the herd on this bench in the timber. And with the limited amount of knowledge that we had at that point, it wasn't like we heard two bulls bugle. And if we would have heard that, it totally changes everything. We only heard one bull bugle, and the 5-point we realized never really did bugle. It was just dumb luck that it rolled out the way that it did. So we had that situation. We had Brad, I was filming, and Shannon called in a pretty decent little 5-point to about 30 yards from Brad, and Brad chose to pass on it. And then we all got stung by bees because we kicked a hive and blah, blah, blah. Just my hand all swollen up, and Brad got stung like 5 times. It was a nightmare.
I hate bees. I get bees are really important to Earth, but I really don't like them. Dude, it's like in Oregon, when you're like wading through salmon berries, like the thought of like putting my hand on like a hornet's nest, like a big paper nest. I had that happen. I didn't have that happen, but close a couple times this year, where I'm like wandering through the woods and I like look up, I'm like, holy shit. Right there, in front of your face. Like, you could have hit your head on it.
Yeah.
That would suck.
I grabbed the tree branch and I got hit on the hand, and it was like, it felt like something poked me, but it didn't feel like a bee sting until I realized, like, that's still stinging in my hand. And then as I pulled my hand out, like, I saw a bee take off, and I was like, just screamed bees, and Shannon had already basically kicked open the hive, and we were running down the hill. It was pretty funny. But so we did have, group wise, we had lots of other opportunities throughout the rest of the season. And then we had that rain set in that last week, and I had to go to work for 4 days. I had to go to a conference in Vegas, and I had another opportunity on a much, much bigger bull than the one that I killed actually a couple days before, while I was solo hunting. So Shannon and Brad went in, and they hunted that bull. They hunted a few other bulls that I had found that week, because I was just running around by myself. And for whatever reason this year, I got super lucky on locations, and I would change locations, and I ended up finding aggressive bulls that were rubbing really, really well. And so that last week, they were finding a couple of new elk and then finding the elk that I had found, and they were hitting them, and it just, that weather just did not allow, it wasn't conducive to killing anything. And they just ended up having a couple of, past opportunities that they decided just to not take. And at the end of the season, they, neither one of them filled their tag. But again, it's different when your freezer is completely empty and you're just hunting for meat. So,
oh yeah, for sure. So one thing I want to ask you about, I have a hard stop here in 5 minutes.
of course.
Kids school, got to pick up kids from school, man.
Yeah.
Dad life.
That's
Hashtag
right.
dad's life. You and I are going to get together here pretty soon and go look at some bows.
Yeah, we are.
From an unnamed company that you can probably guess. Yeah. When are we going to do that, buddy? When are we going?
Your schedule is tighter than mine, so whenever you have the time. Actually, I just got a text from Casey the other day because this unnamed company just launched some new stuff, which is, it's super intriguing. I wish
we're talking about Bowtech. It's not an unnamed company. I was just trying to be a dick.
Yeah. But yeah, they just launched their center mount system for their riser, which I know that part's not new, but obviously a lot of their other technology is new. But I'm really intrigued to shoot that new system. And Casey, at the pro shop down there, was asking when we were going to come down, and I told him that it's up to your schedule. As soon as you have time, then we'll make our way down there. So I'm game any day.
What I told him is, once I kill a blacktail here in the next couple weeks, I'm done with the bow I'm shooting. I'm ready to start over from scratch, and I'm stoked to go down there with you, man. And it's crazy. I've been to their headquarters, I think once or twice, but I only live an hour and a half from there, so it's ridiculous. I should absolutely know more about those guys. And I've shot their bows and love their bows, and I think they're great bows, obviously. And I'm stoked to do it, man. I hope next year in the woods we can meet up and hunt around a little bit. And I think it'll happen next year, actually, because we're actually gonna plan it out.
Yeah, I think we should definitely make that plan, especially, content wise. I'd love to get, some footage of you out there, just, having a camera guy instead of just trying to self film everything with your cell phone would be good.
Yeah, especially it would have been helpful when I, missed a couple times this year to have a camera guy, so I actually know what happened.
Yeah, well, that actually makes a big difference on, the after shot stuff of being able to go back and review it, like my elk. And
for sure.
I might, honestly, Dave, I might not have gone and even looked for blood on that bull that I shot in Idaho if I didn't review the film, because I was 100% convinced I missed that elk because he fell out of my sight picture so fast. I didn't even think that I hit that bull.
I'm sure that happens all the time rifle hunting, dude. Like when I shot that bull in Montana at 550.
Yeah.
Well, I found him that morning. I found him and I was by myself, and I delormed a friend and I said, "Hey, you better come up here because I'm going to go hunt a bull that's in a spot. First of all, if I kill him, I need help. Second of all, I need a spotter because I can't get any closer than like 600 yards." So he came up there. We went up there, and that bull popped out right before dark. And dude, if I wouldn't have had him there telling me that I missed, I would have gone over there and like wasted a whole bunch of time and spooked a bunch of bulls looking for blood because I was so convinced. How could I miss? He's like, no way, man. I saw you were shooting high. You shot high. I saw it. He's good. He walked off. We're good. And I watched him walk off too. But still, I was like, there's no way, dude. I was like, I felt so good. But I actually ended up killing that bull two days later in that spot. If I'd have gone over there in the middle of the night and like, completely contaminated it, I think archery hunters wound a lot of animals and lose them. There's no doubt about it. But I think rifle hunters oftentimes wound animals that they had no idea they shot.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard, dude. 550 yards straight away is like, it's like 1,000 yards across the canyon. Right. It takes a long time, right?
Yeah.
And especially if you're shooting right before dark and stuff, it's a big commitment. And I believe if you're going to shoot that far, it's best to have a spotter that can watch it, or if you're filming, that's good too, because at least you can review it, right? But if you're not filming and you don't have a spotter, how the hell are you supposed to know? I don't care what anybody says. When the rifle recoils, your scope goes off of them for a second. Like, if you can hold a 300 Weatherby mag on that animal with the scope and watch the bullet hit, you're a better man than me. It's just good luck. Maybe with a 243 or something.
6.5 Creedmoor or something small, you know, like, it's possible, but not, and you're shooting suppressed or with a muzzle brake, but not a big caliber, you know, even the suppressed rifle that I'm shooting with a 7 SAUM 175 grain bullet, like, it's still got to bounce, you know, and you come back on the target faster, but you're still struggling to keep it in the scope the whole time.
Yeah, and they can go, as you found out, they can. I mean, if like I've seen that video, it just drops. It's like boom.
Yep.
Oops, I missed. He must have ran off. I don't want to walk all the way over there.
Yep. Yeah, you saw how fast he fell out of the screen. I mean, it's just instantly gone. You know.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
And where he laid out behind the trees, I couldn't see him. So I was completely convinced that all the other elk were running off of him. You know, one of them was him. So. But as far as Bowtech goes, you just tell me when and where to meet, and we'll make it happen. I'm here to help with that, facilitate that whole thing. I think it'd be a good day.
Hell yeah, let's do it.
Fun trip down
there. All right, I got to run and get kids, man. Appreciate you coming on. If you don't mind, keep your browser open on your phone, because it has to.
Yep.
It's only 41% uploaded. So once we go off, it'll keep doing that. And I appreciate it. I'm going to put this out tomorrow. So.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
I'll let you know. Thanks, buddy.
Appreciate it. Thanks, man. Talk to you soon.
All right, see ya. Bye.
Bye.